One of the world's most mind-bending teachings comes from the great Advaita Vedanta master, Gaudapada. Gaudapada's teachings are often misunderstood and misinterpreted, leading a spiritual aspirant to go literally mad from no real comprehension. In this podcast, we will explain Gaudapada's teaching of ajati, non-causation and non-evolution. Now, if you enjoy this podcast and you'd like to see more, they are exclusive on my Patreon. I will leave a link in the pinned comment and in the description if you would like to join the Shanti Sangha and explore these podcasts with us, where we dive deeper into the great spiritual knowledge. One of the most mind-boggling and misunderstood spiritual teachings in the world come from the great Advaita Vedanta master Gaudapada, who actually was believed to be the founder of Advaita Vedanta. And this is the teaching of ajati, non-causation, non-evolution, basically that the world doesn't exist. Now, there are a few ways to understand this, and a lot of people misunderstand this teaching, which we're going to go into today. But to set the stage, I want to read one verse from the Mandukya Upanishad Kataka, which actually, the commentary in here is from both Gaudapada and Shankara. So Shankara is the disciple's disciple of Gaudapada, and these two are probably considered the forefathers of Advaita Vedanta. But there are so many verses in the Mandukya Upanishad Kataka that we could talk about, but just one to set the stage to kind of get our mind into this idea of non-causation, which is a lot different than when we think about, like, if we look into Buddhism, right? Buddhism is all about the path of causation and other spiritual traditions as well. But then when you get into Advaita Vedanta, you have this aspect of this non-causation, and we'll unpack that, what that means and how to understand that. And if there still is causation, which is another discussion, right? So in the Mandukya Upanishad, it states, "There is no dissolution, no birth, none in bondage, none aspiring for wisdom, no seeker of liberation, and none liberated." This is the absolute truth. So there are many verses like that, right, in a lot of Advaita Vedanta texts, but that kind of sets a stage where you are not liberated, there is no one who is in bondage, and so who are we fundamentally, is basically what Gaudapada is getting at, right?
Yes, it's fundamentally understanding the Nirguna Brahman aspect, but I would say in Gaudapada's perspective, there is no such thing as Nirguna or Saguna, it's only Brahman, right? But yeah, just to name it, it's Nirguna Brahman, so it's a non-causal, no quality at all, it's just a pure nothingness, let's say. If we were to put this in a context of a Taoist metaphysics, we can, I guess, put some sort of connection with the concept of Uchi to Gaudapada's perspective on Brahman, for example. Right? So if anyone is familiar with the Alan Watts once spoken about the background and the foreground. So without the background, there can't be foreground, right? So how fundamentally background itself is first and foremost important foundation to be able to perceive something, right? So that is in Taoism, we call it Uchi, which is complete nothingness, complete void, right? So in Taoist metaphysics, that's where the Tai Chi is coming from. But if we just concentrate on the pure nothingness of Uchi, which brings all existence into manifestation, right? So that Gaudapada's perspective here is to say Uchi itself is a real, non-causal, non-originated, no quality, nothing, right? So maybe if we put it that way, maybe a bit easier to understand, so that background itself is only real. Whatever appears in the foreground is only appearance, it's an illusion.
Yeah, that's right. That's like the snake and rope analogy, right? In Sanskrit, it's called ajaropa, which is that the rope is all that exists, but we believe the appearance of a snake in the rope. So we don't see the world aright. We have a misapprehension of the world, right? And so, getting back to your idea of the background and the foreground, is Gaudapada is saying, like you said, that only the background exists and the foreground is this temporary appearance, kind of like the waves on an ocean, right? And so to understand this, or to go deeper into this, like you said with Nirguna, right? So when we look at Brahman itself, right? Brahman, when we look at it from a proper Vedantic perspective, and we take out the Vaita, the dualism, the Vishishta Vaita, the non-dual, the qualified non-dualism, and the Advaita, the non-dualism, strict non-dualism, Brahman itself is composed of two aspects, which is saguna and nirguna. You mentioned nirguna before. So saguna, sa means with, gunas, with qualities, and nir means without, right? So if we think about Buddhism, nirvana, right? The candle is blown out. The identity is completely gone. So when we think about Brahman in this sense, so you have gunas, you have qualities, and there are three qualities in the manifest world: sattva, rajas, and tamas. And those constitutions exist in us as well. It's in everything, right? And so there is that aspect. That's the manifest aspect of Brahman, right? And so you want to think of like the coin. So you don't choose one side of the coin over the other. Understanding Brahman in its totality, you just understand the coin. And so the coin is both saguna and nirguna. Now, the problems with Gaudapada's teachings is he's focusing on the nirguna, right? And we could say the problem with Samkhya and yoga is they're focusing on the other side of the coin, saguna. Like there's just the manifest world. There's Purusha who observes the manifest world, the pure awareness, but there's no sort of a higher, like Brahman, like ultimate reality. But from Gaudapada's perspective, he focuses on the nirguna aspect. So the nirguna only aspect, right? With a rejection of the saguna. Now, there are obviously, like even when I read that verse before, there are insights that you can glean from Gaudapada in understanding this, right? Because in your spiritual practice, the point of following Advaita Vedanta and studying Gaudapada is that he's imploring us to abide in the Atman, right? So the Atman, when we look at the coin, which side of the coin does the Atman exist on? Right? The Atman is on both sides, but its nature is no guna. It's without qualities, right? Atman has no qualities. It's not an individual soul. Individual soul is Jivatman. And so the Saguna side, Jiva, right? Yes. Because a Jiva is a manifest aspect of Brahman, of Saguna. So Gayang, Jason, everyone listening and watching, your manifest part of yourself is the Saguna aspect. But there's a part of you that's no guna, and that's the Atman. And so, like I was saying, the benefit of studying these texts is to abide more in that Atman, and then you allow sort of the karma of your manifest being just to function as it will, right? And obviously, that's easier said than done, but that doesn't mean you neglect that. That's probably where I have a departure from Gaudapada, because he actually, I shouldn't say he's neglecting that, but he's saying that you should just reject that sort of saguna jiva part of yourself, because in some sense it's illusory, right? Because a jiva is a product of socialization. It has been built brick by brick by brick, so you become who you are, in air quotes, where who you are is truly Atman. And so Gaudapada extends that, because when he understands that all we are is Atman, then he takes it a step further and says all that there is Atman, right? And so that's the step further that I think a lot of people who follow, or who attempt to follow Advaita Vedanta find it hard to accept, because they still live their lives, they still encounter someone kicking them in the ass, or their boss treating them poorly at work. And it's hard to just abide as the Atman when you are trying to encounter this jiva reality that you exist in. Now, if you're going to be a sadhu and a yogi, it's a little bit easier, right? Because you have renounced the world. Even though you're still in a body, you have renounced the world, and that you don't have a job anymore. You don't have a family. You're not part of society, basically. You're a vanaprastha, right? You've renounced the world. And so I think that's the plight that a lot of us on the spiritual path find ourselves in, and why a lot of people find it hard to accept Gaudapada's teachings.
Yeah, I think Gaudapada's teaching is complete in itself and also incomplete in itself as well at the same time.
That's the genius of it, right?
Yes, yes. I think it is important to understand the core philosophy of Gaudapada's, because I believe that there is a most foundational philosophy to understand the Vedanta, the concept of Brahman and Atman, right? But again, if we were to say that, okay, then all this physical world, manifested world, our body, everything that we can feel and see and touch is illusion, and literally, as you mentioned, that Gaudapada would say that that is not real entirely, and he would advocate to neglect it all, right? Because it is a Maya, it is illusion in his philosophy. Then we are like get to a bit of a confusing part. Then like what is the world? What is the manifested world? What about things that we can taste, we can smell, we can feel and touch and see and whatnot? If that's all illusion, what is this all about? Where is the explanation for this? Then Gaudapada will say this is all illusion. only Brahman is real, right?
You were never born, you'll never die.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people who are just literally believe in his, not believing, I should say, just embracing this philosophy only, that we've witnessed it directly, firsthand in India, who gone a little bit mad, right? Like gone a bit crazy, and let's say some foreigners who dropped out of the map, basically, they threw out their passport because everything is an illusion, apparently.
Yeah.
Right? So
Until the police come knocking.
oh, well, exactly. But then they seemed mentally very unstable, and they seem to becoming a bit mentally challenged person in a way. And we see that in even some Indian people as well. So that then, is it really healthy to fully dive into this Gaudapada's perspective? Maybe not in that sense, right?
Yeah.
So I think, as you mentioned about the coin, it's a good analogy that you know where fundamentally that coin itself is nirguna, right? The quality-less Brahman, right? But we need to acknowledge that coin has two sides, right? So that we need to understand that the physical reality does exist, but how we want to see it. So I think understanding Vedanta itself is a perception of the individual is the first and foremost important thing, because you can perceive the world as a purely Gaudapada's perspective that everything is an illusion. So you become a sadhu, you just pour the ash all over your body and you live a life of ascetic. Or you have a perspective that Gaudapada's teaching is also real, but also this reality is also real as well. So that is just a little shift of perspective. We do function as an individual within the society, and that there is a beautiful thing too, I think. That hence, again, the Vasishtavaita that qualify the dualism's perspective is that this Maya itself is also come from the Brahman, so aspect of Brahman. So it's not entirely unreal or tamasic, right? So that has its beautiful element as well. But fundamentally, we are all Atman. Yes.
And that's the point, right? Like that's the crux of Gaudapada's teaching, where I think, as you were saying, with the people who drop off the map in Tiru and places like this, or the people who follow maybe Neo-Advaita around the world and who just sit there like a stone Buddha and don't say anything and are lifeless, they completely misunderstand the teachings of Gaudapada. So there needs to be a clarification. And I think that the problems arise with Gaudapada's teachings arise with the idea of ajati, right? But the idea of ajati on a collective level, this is where people struggle. See, when you look at ajati, non-causation, non-evolution on a collective level, people find it hard to wrap their head around. Well, what do you mean? So the world wasn't born? The universe didn't have a like a beginning, big bangs, so to speak. And so they get really confused. And then people then will say, oh, it's just Maya then, it's just an illusion, right? Like, without understanding that Maya, when we understand in its literal understanding, comes from ma or marta, which means measurement, which is the illusion of measurement, which means an individual, how we measure the reality, right? And once you understand this key teaching, then you will read Gaudapada in a different way. And you won't exaggerate and say then that the whole world is just an illusion. It's an illusion until I pop a laxative in your coffee. You know what I mean? And so this is the problem. When they think of ajati in a collective way, they get lost. And like you said, it's better to accept the world as real, because for me, from studying this for so long, I find that the crux of Gaudapada's teachings is more on a personal level. So the whole reason he's talking about you were never born, you will never die, you weren't in bondage, you weren't in liberation, is because the real you is Atman. And so he's trying to get you out of this fixated egotistical mentality that we have of our isolated separate self, right? So he's trying to sort of allow us to get distance from the jiva so we can abide in the Atman, right? So we can allow our personal life to just to run its course and its karma to resolve itself as you abide as the Atman. And so I think this is the main takeaway. And I think this is where those people get it wrong, because they just start to think that everything is an illusion. But if you look at Gaudapada's crux of his teachings, he's saying your jiva and what you believe in is the illusion. That's Maya. Because you're measuring reality according to your socialization. That's the measurement of reality, right? And where does that measurement come from? It comes from your jiva's conditioning. And we've all had different types of conditioning, cultural, social, different types of education. And that's how we measure the reality. But that measurement itself is Maya, right? And so you've got to abide in the Atman, which is undifferentiated consciousness. Again, never born, never die. It's not in bondage, nor needs to be liberated. It already is liberated, right? It is that liberated state. And so that's the problem right there. And so going back to your point in regards to this is kind of where, like, if you're studying particularly Gaudapada and you understand what I'm saying, this is like why traditions like Kashmir Shaivism and Shaiva Siddhanta in Tamil Nadu will say, once you understand sort of the Advaita Vedanta corpus and you understand Gaudapada's teachings, that's when Siddhanta and Kashmir Shaivism begin. And this goes back to the two fundamental axioms of Hindu thought, which define all of the philosophy within India, and there's different ways of understanding it. The first one being Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, which the Advaita Vedantins follow, which means Brahman alone is real, the world is an appearance. And then the second one is Brahma Satyam Jagat Satyam, which means Brahman alone is real, the universe is also real. And so there's no then distinction between Saguna and Nirguna, right? Because you then understand that Brahman is the whole coin. You know what I mean? There's not the physical reality is Shakti, is the power of Shiva, right? It's not something that we need to sort of reject or recoil from. It exists, and it doesn't matter what we think about it. Whether we think it's an illusion or not, doesn't matter. It's going to exist nevertheless. Right? And so the whole purpose is then to just concentrate on your own spiritual practice, understand that you are the Atman and allow the world to be as it will. Debates about whether the entire universe is ajati or not is beyond our pay grade, right? That's for Brahman itself, right? But us on a saguna level, on a jiva saguna level, with qualities, we have gunas, right? It's just about us understanding who we are on a guna saguna level, but understanding that our true nature is Atman, right? And so when you understand Maya's illusion of measurement, it actually resolves these two axioms. Because Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, Brahman alone is real, the world is an appearance, is going back to the snake and rope analogy, where it's actually, all that exists is Brahman, but we superimpose our conditioning onto it, which we believe then the rope is a snake, right? And so what does that mean with the first axiom? It means that we don't see Brahman in everything. And so Gaudapada's teaching is to see Atman in all, right? See Atman in all, like, because that's all that exists. And that's part of the teaching. So if you want to then extrapolate that and then start to overthink about ajati and this and that, that's up to you. But the core of his teaching is to see, once we, when we know Maya is the illusion of measurement, is that all that we see is Brahman itself. It's like when Alan Watts first went to India, and he was in the south, Trivandrum, I think, and then this guy was going down the road like this, and then the guru looked at Alan and said, "Shiva's coming on funny today, isn't he?" So, because that's it, and so that guru he was trying to exhibit to Alan that that's what he sees, right? He sees Shiva and all. And, Shiva, Brahman presents itself in many strange, mysterious ways, So, but that's how we resolve those two axioms and sort of evolve, I think, our thinking about Brahman and whether, is it just Nirguna or is it also Saguna as well?
Right. Yeah, I think it makes a lot more sense to apply Gaudapada's teachings in that sense, as in deconstructing the self in a metaphysical sense, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So instead of seeing the world as real or not real in collective sense, as you mentioned, but if we could apply this philosophy into individual level, it makes a lot more sense, because do we perceive ourselves as Brahman alone or Jiva alone, right?
Yeah.
So then it becomes pretty clear that we are spiritual existence, and we have the seed which come from Brahman, which is Atman. And if we can embody that perception and seeing the world from that place, then in a sense the world is real or not real, it doesn't really matter, right? So you don't have to get into this argument of reality is real or not, right? A lot of people do get into that sort of argument. Then what becomes more important is that our perception, seeing the world, is measured or not measured, like you said. Is that perception come from perspective of Maya or not, right? Yeah. So the deconstructing our perception, looking out to the world, is what becomes most important thing. Then if we can see the world from the Nirguna perspective, like you're saying, that, Shiva is coming funny today. And from that perspective, everything is a play. As a lot of Hindu philosophers say, that life is a play, world is a play.
Leela, yeah.
Leela, that's right. Because that is all part of this great, beautiful story of Brahman, basically. Or do we believe that this body is real, this persona, as we would like to identify ourselves, is real, our role is real? If we get into this realm, then the world become too concrete and solid, right? Then we get into the argument of what's right or wrong, right? Which actually happens all the time. We witness every day. But yeah, so that's the thing that we can apply to ourselves in a very personal, individual level, to the teaching, that to deconstruct our own ego, identity, whatever you want to call it, to shift that from Maya or Saguna to Nirguna, that from the perspective of Nirguna, Brahman is seeing the world and everything is kind of a perfect harmony, that you can see it that way then.
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting because the paradox really is that the world is an illusion and real at the same time, in the same way that the world is Saguna and Nirguna at the same time. And the irony is that we realize Nirguna through Saguna, and it's an abidance in Nirguna that we can allow Saguna to run its course and allow our karma to play out, and allow the play of life, Leela, as you said, to run its course. And we're not an actor anymore from that stage. We're more like a stage director, where we're observing the play rather than being involved in the play. We've realized it is a play, and we realize we are assuming a role. And I'm not saying that, we don't all have roles to play, but we realize that the fundamental human condition is that we do play roles, right? And so when you operate from the Atman and all you see is the play unfolding, then there's no real reason for you to be overly engaged in it. And that's the crux of these teachings, right? Advaita Vedanta teachings, particularly Gaudapada, that's the type of renunciation we need. It's not you need to go to Arunachala and sleep on the street, or Varanasi and sleep on the Ganga, on the banks of the Ganga. It's that we've renounced our desire to be so engaged in our personal life and our conditioning. We've renounced that. We are applying neti, not this, not that practice of viveka in our mind, that discrimination, discernment, and we see what is real and what is not. Something happens in the world, some worldly event, and then it piques your interest, and the next minute you're triggered about something. Investigate that. If you're abiding in the Atman, you will investigate that, right? And then you'll get to the root of it. And this is where Gaudapada comes in, and this is where the teachings of ajati help us on an individual level. So guys, we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you guys next time.